Welcome, everybody, to the Planning Commission, Thursday, July 12th. The first item on the agenda is approval of the agenda. Do you have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Moved by Kate, seconded by Susanna. Any discussion? Looks good. All right, all in favor of the agenda as stated?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next item is the approval of the minutes from June 28th. Motion to approve the minutes.
So moved. Second?
Moved by Dick, seconded by Stephen. Any discussion? I didn't have anything substantive. All right, well, seeing no comments, all in favor of approval of the minutes? Aye. Okay,
I abstained. I wasn't here.
good point. Any disclosures relating to any potential conflicts of interest tonight? Seeing none. Open to the public. I'm assuming, Sean, that you're here for discussion later on?
Yes.
All right, fair enough. Okay, so on to the discussion of the comprehensive plan. It's a good way to get a few extra minutes. Starting with public utilities, facilities, and services. So Dean, for this, as we've been doing, should we, well, unless anybody has any other ideas, do you want to just go section by section? If there's any comments, we can address them or add them?
Yeah, sure. This is a packet, this is a section that's been in packets at least 3 times. So if there's anything seriously wrong, I would have hoped that people would have said, hey, while we're waiting to discuss this, I can put it up on the screen. If there are not going to be a lot of comments, then we'll establish that. But I included in your packets the pages. It starts on page, what would be 43 in the current document. And we can walk through. We had to pull out the old laptop from storage because the one that we have had only a year or so is dead. It'll still work with Google Docs, but
Yeah, and there wasn't, aside from a period and just a clarification on one point, I didn't have anything serious.
Yeah, 3 or 4 little things.
Yeah, then, just is it first section or?
Yeah, I was gonna suggest on the first bullet. Third line, that we delete and incentivize, as the incentive is public water and sewer and stormwater facilities. So developers are not going to need to be incentivized to develop in that area.
That's a fair point. All right.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
So, yeah, any issues or concerns with removing and incentivize from that first bullet?
Why was it there? What's the history on that?
I think some of the history is that there's carrots and sticks, and just relying on sticks, we've seen a fair amount of growth taking place outside of the sewer service area. So if we do in fact want growth to be going into the sewer service area or the growth area, there may need to be a combination of carrots and sticks.
Oh, that makes sense.
I just don't believe it's really I think it won't curb development in the rural district. We have to take care of that in the rural district. But I do believe that the incentive for developers going to be water and sewer. It's been that way as long as I've been in business.
I mean, are there other incentives that we could fathom that, just to keep it open?
Yeah,
Density, parking.
exactly. I think there neighborhood form. I think there are, you know, there's a lot of things that could incentivize development going there. that we could be taking a more direct way to encourage that, rather than just kind of be really, to me, this is very passive to just, leave it at that.
So does it sound like we're leaning more towards keeping it in there?
I'd say
It's a
that's
suggestion.
Yeah. Would you be okay to just leaving it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, all right.
No, I just don't think that it needs to be done.
Which is fair.
But-
Yeah.
So the next comment anyone has on any of the proposed edits, any more on that page, or?
My next one was under recommended actions. It just looked like there was an extra space between fire department and Shelburne, the first recommended action. Above where you were, page 44.
You said in recommended actions number.
Yeah, right under the second, well, sorry. Yeah. Yeah, right on the top of page 45, fire department and Shelburne Rescue Squad. It looks like there's one between and Shelburne. It's at the end of the line, so it's not showing up there, but in the printout, it looked like it was.
I wondered about the very first line in the section, under recommended actions too. It says undertake and when necessary. I was thinking maybe if we just deleted that and put up capital U on update.
Yeah.
So I just want to keep up with your first comment. Your feelings, Shelburne Rescue Squad should either be Shelburne Fire Department and Shelburne Rescue Squad, or just make it?
At the end of that first line, at the end of and, I think there's two spaces.
Oh,
In our print, it's a ticky-tack thing. It's just in our printout. That's not a line carriage return. It
Okay.
just, so there's an extra space after and. You can
Okay.
probably put the
But
cursor
that'll-
there and,
yeah, okay.
yeah.
So Dick's comment about undertake and when necessary.
Just to remove the,
Those
when
4 words,
necessary.
yeah, just update.
Oh,
That sounds good.
And capital
oh, all
update.
of it.
Wait, say that again?
Just
Take
remove
out
the first 4
undertake and
words.
when necessary.
I think we can take out at a minimum in the next line.
Yeah.
Okay,
I would agree. Yep.
okay.
Next one, unless those are old comments, the next one I had was on 7, just a period at the end. And I was curious about 8. Just more for my own benefit. When I read it, I wasn't sure what that meant. Like, what is infiltration into sewer lines? Does that mean like new development, punching new holes into existing sewer lines and leveraging?
So there has been a sewer service area in Shelburne for about 15 years. Part of that boundary is a system that allocates the wastewater capacity in 3-year blocks. So there have been policies that have been included in the plan that look at using that capacity wisely and making sure that we don't allocate it outside of the service area. It's not, there are some properties that do have some access to the sewer capacity, even though they're outside the sewer service area. The whole point of the allocation process is to make sure that we don't consume all of the capacity quickly. That was the fear when the plants were expanded, 15, 18 years ago. So this system makes the capacity get spread out, and there are 3-year blocks, and so you can't use, if you used all of the amount that's available in a 3-year block, then we just wait until the end of the block and then we get another 3-year allocation. That's how the system works in general.
Wasn't part of that too.
But we haven't used the capacity at the rate that people thought we would when we upgraded the plants. The concern is that we'll use it too fast. We'll make this investment and we'll use it too fast. That has not turned out to be the case.
And wasn't part of it Also, a developer may have a long-term project, and that gives them a commitment for that period of time. Or was that
Well,
not?
my understanding is that it was part of basically a growth management strategy. We wanted to we made this investment. We didn't want the investment to be basically used up in a short period of time. And the allocation system was a way to make sure that we weren't finding ourselves needing to upgrade the sewer plants 5 years after we had just upgraded them.
Are we talking about, we're not talking about number 8 though, right?
You said 7 or
No,
something.
I was just period at the end of 7, but number 8, I wasn't sure what that actually meant with the
That's what I thought
infiltration.
you were talking about. So
I thought I was
okay,
really
so-
missing
So
something.
you did say about infiltration. So Shelburne has had an issue with our sewer lines, like a lot of communities. The sewer lines are old, and water will get into the system, and when it rains, there's a huge spike in the amount of waste that the plant has to treat because it's creeping into the system. A lot of the stuff that's going on right now is intended to reduce infiltration.
I got you. So it's not, it's water from the outside, like stormwater or whatever, that's
Yes.
just getting in there. I got you. Okay.
You had a comment on 4. At the end of 4, I wondered if we shouldn't add after engineering studies when adopted by the select board. So sometimes they'll get a grant for a project, and then the project turns out to be not something that the results are not something that needs to go right into the plan. Or, I mean, it doesn't happen that often, but occasionally. So I just thought that a plan shouldn't automatically go into the capital budget program. It should be one that select board determines, yes, this is a good idea. We don't have money for it now, but we want to do it. So at that point, it's been adopted.
Yeah, and just as the person that, put the green lettering in, my intention in adding the words broadly supported planning studies and engineering studies was to directly address the concern that you are raising, Dick. I thought beyond the select board, I thought it would, it's implicit that a study, when it's done, it needs, and I wouldn't say approved, but accepted by the select board. There's rarely a project that's done without the delivery of the product and the acceptance of the product. So I used the phrasing I did because I thought select board and people beyond the select board. If you want to make specific mention of the select board, maybe you would consider broadly supported planning studies and engineering studies, somehow including those accepted or approved by the select board.
Something to that, just that effect, yeah. Just that things don't automatically end up on the,
But wouldn't it have to be approved by the select board to be on there anyway?
No. Well, this is encouraging it.
Well, the
This
select
is-
board does
but-
approve the capital plan.
Right.
Right,
So at
right.
the end of the day, they would have to, I mean, nothing.
Yes, they
It's
would.
not the capital plan without their stamp.
I kind of like the broadly supported because that suggests more public outreach to make people aware of things, which is, what led to the, people's concerns about the Bay Road study.
Kind of lean that way too.
Is that what you're trying to get at, Dick? Yeah.
That, yeah, in general.
So,
If it makes it easier, do you just want to accept those changes and then?
yeah, and with this thing.
Oh, never mind.
I'm gonna, as
I
long as I
gotcha.
know that we're going through and there's nothing hanging, I'll do it later.
Fair, okay.
I can't even see it on here.
Oh.
I can't get it to project, to be on both my monitor and that, so it's a pain.
I'm with you.
I'm gonna have a stiff neck tomorrow.
On 9, should we add
Recommended action.
sewer to the mix?
So we're going down to 9?
Should we add sewer into that?
Now that the
Solid waste
idea
recycling,
of coordinating,
Stormwater and sewer.
well, we have a contractual relationship with South Burlington regarding stormwater. We don't have that with South Burlington on the sewer side. This consultant has recommended we explore it, but
Didn't know if there's a way we
I
should
mean,
consider,
it could still work if it said to address stormwater management and wastewater disposal, but I just wanted to make
This
it.
is pretty big anyway. It's working towards a regional solution. So no harm in adding that.
So, and wastewater.
And
school.
wastewater. Yeah.
Okay.
And then your comment on number 11, it was moving it to the telecom section, which I think it works in either, yeah.
And I did move it into the, so I just thought,
This is just one of those things where if for context, it helps to have it in two places because this is facilities, utilities. If there's no
What if-
harm,
yeah,
If you
I
could throw
don't,
in a couple comments in that, that would be great too.
I love it.
Well, yeah, if that's easy for you to do, Dean. At least once every 5 years, review, comma, and if necessary, comma, update the town's policy, et cetera.
okay. I
Good.
don't mean to be sounding like I'm cracking the whip, but you have a long list of things
yeah.
to get through.
I know. Well, that's the end of this section, right? Are there any other comments on the remainder?
Just to kind of make it a little pithier, and it shall be to minimize the number of facilities and minimize their impact on the visual and natural features and features and resources. Just kind of make it a little bit more active.
And minimize the,
Minimize the number of facilities and their impact, or their negative impact. Because that's the,
Oh, and then get rid of it and ensure that their impact? Or,
yeah, and then just clear out and ensure that their impact,
oh,
yeah,
okay, so you
yeah,
But
didn't
keep
want
the
that.
visual natural features.
yes,
right.
yeah,
Wanted to take
if
it.
that's, oh dear,
I'm with you.
okay.
Positive vibes.
So negative impact is minimized, is what you wanted to say.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to say on the visual and natural, but you could just say their negative impact is minimized. That's probably the same thing. We are trying to make this pithier.
Minimize the number of facilities and their negative impact on the visual and natural features.
Period. Good.
Right.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah.
Okay, give it to me from the top.
So just click
Okay,
right
So
there.
right where you're at, yeah.
And then remove the next 5 words through impact. Yeah. Done.
And then take is minimized at the end of the sentence out.
Yeah,
Or, yeah.
yeah. Okay. Okay, good.
All right. And then does that finish the section, or are there any other comments on the last few points?
No.
Are we going to objectives?
That's stormwater, water related, that's getting into future land use, right?
Okay.
I mean, I don't want to open a discussion really on number 15, but I know that that's something we talked a lot about, and I just want to make sure everyone's happy, leaving it pretty open.
Yeah, I think open is,
Okay.
it leaves leeway. All right. So the next section is the stormwater, water-related language and draft future land use section.
So why is number 8 even in this section?
This is
So the,
not in this section, right? It's,
that was included, that's, this page, stormwater related language in the draft future land use section, was to just give you, and I did this earlier, and I could have kept it out of this last time, to give you the understanding that there were stormwater policies in other sections that, it's kind of like this situation with telecom. They're echoing what it'll be in this section, but this is not any proposed edit in that page.
Okay.
That was just to show you that these topics are addressed in future land use, or at least as of the time that I prepared that, and other sections. That was all that was about.
So all right, you want me just to hold this out? I had just a couple of like typo type things. And to look at?
For those other sections?
Yeah, the
Yeah, and
stormwater-related language.
Yeah, so if you want to pass it on, I don't know that we need to go through.
Sure, yeah, absolutely. I'll hold that to the side then. There were just some extra characters and some
You got it, okay.
words out of place.
Yeah,
Okay, so then that takes us into mapping.
yep, okay. So, in your packets, there was quite a bit of information having to do with mapping, and I had indicated that, well, sorry. We need to make some decisions relating to mapping. So I wanted, first of all, for people to understand what the requirements of statute are. And I made this table that extracts from statute the maps that need to be in a plan in some fashion. There's a land use plan map, transportation plan map, utility facility map, educational facilities map, and flood resiliency map. Because we are seeking to have our plan recognized in the 248 process, we want to have an enhanced energy section, and that, to meet those requirements, we need a series of maps. So I created this table and tried to give you some understanding of the need for the plan to have forests, recreation, ag areas, the future land use pieces, that's not so complicated. Aquifer protection areas, wetlands, forest blocks, wildlife habitats. People, I'm hoping, have had a chance to look through all of this. I recognized, well, I mentioned that usually education facilities end up in a facilities map. There are, well, I'll just leave it at that. There are other maps that we have had in the plan because we want them, although they're not required, and I guess I would question how necessary some of them are, especially since we're trying to have a document that is more compact or more concise. But we have everything from topography to different types of geology. You've seen these ag potential of soils. We've had a La Platte River Greenway map that goes back to very olden times, as well as a bunch of different resource maps. But they go on and on. So we more than meet the minimum requirements, I would say. And we also put on individual maps features that in some other towns are on combined maps. So I also created a table, and I apologize because it's small print, but I laid out these different required maps, and then I also identified some of the maps that we've had in Shelburne that I consider maps that people have some pretty serious attachment to. Maps related to natural resources, maps related to bike ped facilities, cultural resources, significant views map is one that's been considered important. And that list could go on. Yeah, it could go on and on. But as the commission is thinking about this problem, again, it has to think about how many maps are reasonable in the plan as it's being reformatted. Now, in each of these headers, I included in parentheses the number I thought you might want to consider for a given section. So I think right now the town plan's land use section has 5 or 6 maps in it. I don't know that you need that many. So I've suggested maybe you could get by with 2 or 3. The transportation, maybe 2, probably not 3, but I said 2 or 3. Utilities or facilities, maybe we won't squeeze everything into a single map. It could be a very busy map if you're trying to put that in the plan and the format that we're considering. Education, I think, could be combined. Flood resilience is a map that would probably stand alone. The energy maps essentially have been made for the town as part of the regional planning effort. And then with the natural resources maps, I know that Sean has done work with the Natural Resources Committee, and there are currently 4. And maybe there will be 4 total, but I'm not sure that there would be 4 in the document that is being laid out by Maya. I do feel like there may be support for a map in the plan document that would be related to bike and pedestrian facilities. I'm not exactly sure what that map would look like, but I think that's an important one. We were talking last time about cultural resources and whether or not we would do something like the Beers Atlas map, but I think that there's support for that. I think there's support for the significant views map, but I'm not sure where your preferences are going beyond that. Now, what I was hoping to do in this table, in addition to giving you some idea of, how do you distribute the space that you have for the maps, is to show that we have all kinds of things shown, and they show up in different maps, and sometimes they show up on more than one map. So I was hoping to give you some idea of where things might go, so that they don't end up being duplicated. So that's a fairly straightforward point. I think that in utility facilities maps, features like community facilities, schools, rec facilities, library, those are all going to end up in a map or a pairing of maps having to do with natural resources. Having to do with public facilities. When we get into things like land use, flood resiliency, natural resources, and indeed in energy, there are all kinds of natural resource features that are shown in the energy series. So if this group really wants to limit how many maps are included, and that you have to somehow incorporate the energy maps, you should recognize that there are all kinds of natural resource features in those energy maps. That was a part of that process. So that's another general observation that I wanted people to understand, is that these are features that basically are shown on the maps that we've been working with or that are included in our town plan. What do people think they might want to see in the current town plan or in the town plan that you're putting together? The other point that I would make about future land use is that currently it's 5 or 6 maps. We had talked at one point about having the future land use maps maybe including one that was a bit more like South Burlington, which was kind of conceptual. But if we're not going to go down that road, that's fine. But I just would like to know that you're going to try to use the existing future land use maps pretty much with the boundaries that they have right now in the same basic layout. And by that, I don't mean the design, but the same basic features. We're going to have a map that shows the village growth area. We're going to have a map that shows the growth area outside the village. We're going to have the map of the rural area. Then we're going to have the one that shows everything. And then we're going to have the neighborhood development areas. See what I'm saying? That I don't know that we need that many in the document that's being designed right now.
Wasn't there mention that there was somebody who does a lot of work with maps and might be interested in doing some consolidation and tidying things up?
Well, Pam Brangan lives in Shelburne. She's the GIS person at the Regional Planning Commission. She's an active volunteer. She does a lot of things for the town. She just became the chair of the housing committee. But in some way or the other, I'm sure she could help with this. But I've asked her this question: does she have a default list of maps and features that they hand out to towns? And when I asked, they don't have that. They'll make the maps that the town wants to see in its plan. So if the commission can decide what it would like to see on which maps, then she could help us by making those maps. So that's one thing. There are already, though, many, many maps. And more as the week went by and I was thinking about this meeting, I I reminded myself just how many we have, actually, I'm going to get rid of this. We have documents that have been adopted by the town, and okay, so actually, let me just start with the energy.
Dean, on this chart, are the big X's ones that you recommend keeping and the small X's evaluating whether we want to delete
I
them?
was trying to have a system of showing which ones were maybe most important, but it ended up breaking down, so don't attach too much significance to the capital versus not. So these are the energy maps that have been prepared by the Regional Planning Commission for towns to use so that they would have the elevated status. This is the first map, and it basically shows the location of existing energy production. So if there's a solar panel, a wind turbine, a hydro dam, it's on there. That's not a huge,
Well, and that will change by the day.
it'll change over time because people are putting in panels and things like that all the time. But we're still supposed to have a map that shows that, and so that box will be checked.
It's good to
But-
see as of,
Yeah,
this
it
year,
is kind of.
this is what we've
I
got.
mean,
it's helpful, I think.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting. You can get the sense that they busted out a bunch of these maps because for towns, irrespective of whether or not some of the features were in the towns. So there are things that are in the key or the legend that are not necessarily in Shelburne. But there is one wind turbine site. And yes, we will see more of the little red dots as people install panels.
Can I just throw something out? What do folks think of one large map that has a gajillion layers that shows all the information that we want, and then we just call out certain, more minimally, certain maps that are then show up in the town plan, and this larger map with all of the bells and whistles and layers that you can turn on and off is available through a link on the town's website, and people are referred to that if they really want to kind of play with some of this stuff. Because I think, one of the great advantages of mapping these days is you can turn all these layers on and you can kind of show how things interrelate. Like, I would be interested to know for how does the energy sites generation map relate to like where our water resources are and stuff that we want to try and protect, or
And we had talked about that a little bit.
Yeah.
And the thing I would remind the commission is that you're creating a plan that the conventional design involves a static, it's static. And we have PDFs and things like that, and they can be hyperlinked, but fundamentally, there's a document that has static things in it like maps. And I think we could have a map that has a bazillion layers, like you say, but no one would be able to read it in a printed form.
No, understood. I wasn't suggesting that it be available in a printed form. But what I'm getting at is, what if in the actual physical document that might be printed out and available in a hard copy, the conventional way, we just have maps that show what our town plan is aspiring to do, which is to show like future land use, how everything interrelates. So, for example, rather than what you were describing as what we've had in the past, I was thinking of just having a map of the whole thing that kind of shows how all the different parts of the town relate to each other, because we're kind of moving in what we discuss in that direction, right? And that might feature sort of like really important natural resource objectives, scenic resource protection objectives, and transportation goals, so that it's all integrated. People understand as they read the text, oh, okay, this is what this looks like. Because if they're like me, they're going to go right to the picture and not, instead of reading the text first. I mean, that's what I always do. If it can be depicted, visually.
The statute says that you're supposed to have the list of maps that I went through, they say you can mix and match them and slice them any way that you want. But really what's important in my mind is those terms that were underlined in that table, they need to be somehow adopted as part of the document. They should be graphically represented and adopted as part of the document. Then I think,
Are these the ones that you're referring
yeah,
to?
those are the ones
Okay.
that are underlined.
But that would be already, that's only 6 maps. I mean, it would be amazing if we could boil things down to something like that. I mean, we have like, I don't know, 35 of them now or something, right?
Right, I mean, I think that, yes, it could be those 6 maps, although one of those, if it's the energy right off the top, I'm showing you that, well, okay, if it's the energy map or one from the energy series, is it the existing sites like we were showing here? Is it these known constraints? There's a lot of duplication between the features that are shown here. I'll maybe show you in a few minutes this table I've done. There are wetlands and flood hazard boundaries show up on a lot of different maps. But this map has floodways, natural communities, rare, threatened, and endangered species, and wetlands. So is this the one we'd take from energy plan? I don't think it is.
Well, and that actually is why I was asking about what effectively was Pam and what she could do, because quite frankly, I think we could spend 3 hours and say, these are the maps we want and this is great, but if it's not feasible to actually have those built and put together, then...
I think that if you desire a layer on a map, it can be mapped. As long as that layer exists, it can be mapped. It's not that is the problem. The question would be, what do you want to be most prominent? What do you want to feature? And like I'm saying with energy, I don't think you want to feature the existing facilities. I don't know that you want to show necessarily the potential resource areas or the prime solar areas. Maybe it is.
But that's a requirement, is it not? That's one of the required maps for the energy section?
It would, right, and so the thing that, as I had said before, and I don't know if I mentioned it again this time, I think that you can be thinking about it could be as few as 6, but I think it might end up being more than the maps that are in the document that Maya lays out. And then there are going to be some maps that you look at and you go, wow, that's a really cool map. I would like for that map to be part of the town plan, just as that's what happened, the last 2 cycles. And they could still be adopted as part of the town plan. They just won't be incorporated into that design. So,
And I'm okay, well, I was in trying to make this easier and more streamlined, and it might end up having to defer some work, but we have certain content needs to be in there. And to the point of, can't each section just have one map and you throw all the layers on there? In the case of, say, energy, Dean, to your point, the state constraints, those constraints might be listed on a map somewhere else, and we could say, okay, so take this one out. But you have the existing site locations that need to be in there. You need the potential solar and wind, and I don't recall if there was another one. But if you start consolidating all of those maps onto one, you don't have enough room for the legend to explain all the stuff that's going on.
and you can't read it.
So it becomes kind of, it's not even it's just going to be
So
noise.
Isn't the point of this map, though, in order to have standing, we are tasked with saying where we're going to allow these things, and we have to allow a certain number of them. So what if you put raw energy potential analysis and then had 2 maps with known constraints and possible constraints, and then raw energy potential analysis on a second map with preferred locations and areas identified as unsuitable? It seems like that would kind of tell you a lot right there. Because if you put it all on one map, it'd be too chaotic,
And that becomes the second part of my point, is that if there isn't somebody who can actually put that together for this, and I mean, if we don't have anybody to do it, it's not going to get done. So again, how much time do we want to spend doing that?
Why can't we put all the maps in a file, an accessible file, and then just put a reference in each of the pages to go to that file, and just have a button that opens that folder up, and they have an identification number for the map,
I think
just to locate it up.
Paper maps are helpful.
Well, they are, but if you're looking for detail, you want to take a map like that one, you want to blow it up so you can see how it affects each property. So having a paper map is nice if you know exactly what you're looking for, but if,
But again, the challenge is that
If you're
there are certain maps that need to be in the plan by statute. And I think to Kate, to your point, and Dean, you and I talked about this, that sure, there can be a link where people can mess around with layers and do whatever they want, or have a file with all of these individual maps. That's all great. For the purpose of the plan, there's certain data that has to be included in the plan, printed out as part of the plan. All of the rest of the stuff, I think all of the maps that exist today, even if they're outdated by 30 years, I mean, if we have them and we don't have anything more current, put that in an appendix somewhere or make it available or say there's a link on the town website or whatever. But what we should focus on for this exercise is making sure that what's required actually is in the plan. And if that means that for each one of those sections, currently you have all of these X's, so future land use has, what is that, 8 or 9, potentially 10 different maps. If there's an opportunity to consolidate some of those and the legends work, like it's a readable thing, but that would really need to be gauged by the person who has the ability to make those updates. And it's a really easy answer. If we don't have somebody to do that, we have to include the maps that we have to include. And anything else can go into an appendix with all of the maps.
so let's approach Pam again and see if what she can do before we spend a whole lot of time spinning our wheels.
Yeah, and I was trying to just narrow it down to, are there decisions that we can make specifically to either say, yep, that one's really old, it doesn't really apply, let's push it out, versus here are some, I mean, if there's a really strong preference to consolidate something, we could make those notes and pass that along, but recognizing that may or may not be possible.
So yeah, I think one way to approach this is definitely to say, okay, let's look at the existing maps, and do you want another map like it? That's let's do that if that would be the way for people to organize their thinking. It's going to not answer the question which ones should be in the document, because you probably end up with more than the document will be able to fold. So let's just so this is the first map in the town plan. I'm not sure if you would want something like this or feel it's necessary in the main document, but if it's one of the documents that could be in the appendix, or something like it, updated version of it.
Well, understanding what, like having a visual of what the growth areas versus rural areas, that's good, but this is one of the ones that there's other data that could go on here. There's plenty of room in the legend. I think there are other maps that could be consolidated onto this one, but it's important to see what the
Right.
those are.
So we've gone through the text, though, with the assumption that there will be maps somewhat like this. And so if we're starting to talk about, well, when you say other things that we bring on this, are you saying combine map 1 with map 2, or combine map 1 with something from like energy?
Oh, no, I was thinking within land use, if they're,
Okay.
like what, so if you're, yeah.
So
Like, even that.
The thing about map 5 is that it's essentially the
blow up.
synthesis of the first 4.
So the composite land use right there, yeah,
Yeah.
that could eliminate all the other ones.
Well, that's kind of where I was thinking
Right.
that I don't know that you need map
Right.
1, 2, 3 in the document. If I was a betting person, I would think that you'd want a map that shows the future land use districts across the whole town as one of your more essential maps in the document.
I would be behind that.
Works for me.
So in this case, and I forget what, 4 is the blow up of okay. So you've got the 3, actually, I don't remember what 1 through 4 were, but if this is the composite of all of them, and it's got
so
the legend.
The thing
I think
about
we're
this is that this is growth area 1, growth area 2, growth area 3, and maybe this is the second future land use map because it is the 3 primary categories. Then map 2 zeroes in on the village, but those districts get carried over to map 5. Map 2, it blocks out the village, but it shows the sub areas of growth area 2, and then same thing with map 4, and then they're all together on map 5. So map 1 gives you the big picture. It's the most coarse, most generalized. Map 5 ties all of the more specific districts together into one map.
Myself, I look at these, when you go through them, and I say, wow, each one of those shows it in a different way and at a different scale. If you look at the village and try to say, okay, where's the village in this? I can't decipher, the village compared to the whole town of Shelburne on this one, so that other map 2 or 3, whatever, all of those seem useful as separate maps. And if we've got them, I'd say, let's put them in.
Right, I think what the balance is, though, is that if we're held to about 100 pages in each one of these maps, in order to be visually aesthetic, you'd need to have at least the majority of a page or a chunk of a page. So you start getting into space considerations.
Yeah.
If you look at the list of all of the maps that currently exist, I mean, there's 30 of them.
I'd go
At
with
least
map
30.
5 and then just put the references in for maps 1 through 4, where to find them.
Yeah.
So, yeah. What about in map 1, just adding the conserved areas onto that?
Adding conserved lands to it?
Yeah.
The-
So you're kind of looking at the macro, we have 4 categories of land, right? We have
Yeah.
the growth area 1, growth area 2, we have the rural area, and then we have conserved areas.
Yeah, the text doesn't really bring land, whether or not it's conserved, into the discussion, so it would be a feature shown in the map that might seem a little out of place. If you wanted to have them included, then you might want to also revisit the text so that it's given some context.
Well, anywhere in the text that there's a reference to a map, regardless of what it, and we just left a lot of placeholders in there now, knowing that there would be a map, but whatever we consolidate, if you end up doing these 3 and adding conservation to it, when you're talking about conservation, refer back to this map 1.
So, and when you say conservation, I do want to make sure I'm understanding you. You're talking about lands where there are conservation easements, or are you talking about the lands that are,
Just
Keep
what
going.
was,
Map
just
5,
that,
or-
just that.
and that's the conservation district, which will need to be updated because there have been some other properties, but that,
I mean, that could become map 1, and you just kind of, label it a little differently. But synthesizes all of the information that's on map 1 right now and this. You just consolidate that, and you've gotten rid of one piece of visual clutter.
This doesn't show growth area 1 in there.
no, it's blocked
Why
it
does
out.
it have
doesn't
this
really
growth
show
area
1
too?
or 2. It was intended to keep the focus outside of those areas.
Oh, okay.
But you could put, village/growth area 1 or something on there. I mean, I think people can grasp that.
How are we doing on pages, Dean?
So what?
How are we doing on pages? If the goal is to consolidate and condense, are we?
You mean,
are we-
how
are
many
we-
pages are we up to right now?
Yeah, are we bigger or smaller than the previous town plan?
Well, things, with the different typeface and things like that, it can be pretty efficient. We're gonna be giving her major sections after tonight, so it's gonna jump there, the bigger sections. So how many pages were in the last document that I emailed out?
Also, Andrew has
Maybe double
offered to take a stab at kind of making things a little pithier, which I think will be, very much more effective, and it'll look much better too. Because right now we have this kind of really wonky, heavy, jargony language, and then we have these beautiful streamlined images. So, except for in the sections that he wrote. So, I'm one of the perpetrators of this, I admit.
So could I, and again, being mindful of time and thinking of ways to just try to chip through this, would you be receptive if I started to sketch this out as there would be 2 maps in the document that are land use related, there would be some version of this that has conservation added to it, and then there would be the composite, and then the others would be in the companion document, whatever we're going to call it. Is that reasonable?
Sounds good to me. And I think it's one of those things that once you start seeing how it looks, it might become obvious what else could be consolidated, or wow, we still have too many maps, let's force a decision. And then it could be based on whatever we can get from Pam or any other sources.
Did you create these maps, or did the Regional Plan Commission?
Well, these
create
were these were done in-house, but the data came from the Regional Planning Commission, I'm pretty
So you
sure.
can manipulate these without
Oh,
going back to the
There's-
Regional Planning Commission?
I think there's a misunderstanding about the ease with which if we have access to the data, we or Pam or someone can bring it into a map form and refine it. So it's really a question of what is it that you want, and then we can make, I didn't want to go ahead and prepare a series of maps without some idea of what people thought were the priorities, because I think more effort should be spent on the maps that are going to go into the design document than those that are going to go into the back of the plan. But there's going to be some iteration on those maps in both categories. But I'm thinking that if we know that you're going to try to have 2 maps in the main document, then we can come back in 2 weeks or a month's time with the product that will, you can react to and say, okay, I like it, or no, I don't like it. So I think knowing that we are working with 1 plus 5 and the others would be in the back is probably enough discussion of future land use, and we can go into the second part to know which of those you feel are important and which can. Okay. The other thing I'm just mentioning is map 6 is was added in one of the off years, and I think that it could probably be dealt with just with a graphic or something like that, but I'll be coming back with some more specific proposal. It maybe would go, well, it may go as an overlay in the composite somehow. In terms of the other, so we had a base map in the current town plan. It's really kind of it's a contrived convention. We don't really need it, but if people wanted a base map, it could be there. It's duplicated throughout. Topography is mentioned, and we have this map because of policies having to do with slope and elevation, but it doesn't have contour intervals. I mean, it doesn't have elevations listed. Is topography?
Doesn't do very much.
That's not, topography isn't one of the required ones, right?
Nope.
Yeah, then that would be something you'd want to be able to zoom in and have more detail online anyway, I would imagine.
Geology, both bedrock and superficial. This was really in, I think, because of a public process that was, it was, what's his name from UVM? The Places Project. Anyway, bedrock geology, it's not a specific requirement.
It's not a specific requirement. Things like this in a town plan, when you're talking about history and just makeup, I think that's interesting. To me, that would be something where if it's space
reference.
required or something, then yeah. Or otherwise, it could be referenced as, we have these things.
Yeah, I'd say if it's, I mean, this kind of stuff, it is interesting, but that could be like a real reference document
And
at
that's
the
how we
end
had
or
it before. Volume
online
1,
or
Volume
something.
2, there was a maps volume that just had all of that stuff.
Yeah.
But not a front of the book type thing.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Ag potential of soils. Ag soils, their heyday is maybe not as great as it was once before, but knowing where soils rated as prime or statewide has had planning implications in the past. It bears on Act 250.
It's important, but again, it's similar to the topography. If anybody really needs to look at it for reference, you'd need to be able to look at it in more detail. I mean, certainly all of these things are interesting. It would be great to just have a book of all these maps in detail, but I would look to balance it between what is required by statute to be in the plan and then anything else. If we need to fill with some things, we could look at this, but I think anybody actually using it for development or planning would need to get into more detail than that
Yeah.
scale.
Areas proposed for agriculture or in agricultural use would be something I feel complies with the statute. There are a lot of areas that are agricultural soils that are not agriculture. So if you wanted something in, yeah, we'll get to that in a little bit, but it's a second tier thing. And potential for sewage, on-site sewage disposal is also something. Historically, it's a big deal to know whether or not there's great potential. If we were seriously examining boundaries of districts outside the sewer service area, we might use this information to try to figure out density.
Again, somebody's gonna have a piece of land and they're gonna go get it evaluated by an engineer and see where there's,
Simplified too, because I don't think anybody really, if you're not a soils engineer, really knows what that means. Maybe you could just have, suitable, marginal, unsuitable,
But not a top tier at all.
No.
This is that La Platte River Greenway map that I mentioned that's been included and re-included. It was, yeah, it's not available in color that I recall. It was done in colors by someone. Maybe you've seen the color version of it. ARD did it, yeah.
Doesn't exist in that form.
There was a La Platte River Greenway study that produced this map. I'm not sure that I ever saw the study, but I know I saw this map, and this map has been in the
So
plan.
if you blow that up,
Yeah,
can
what
you
story
see,
does this tell us?
see some kind of detail?
A lot of it is the land uses within the greenway. So you've got wetland, field, transitional woods, mature forest. It's
19th century.
yeah.
Terrible.
Well,
No one would ever look at that.
but when you first, before we had all the technology we had now, it was like, oh my gosh, it's doing that. I don't have to do it by hand. If you've talked to someone who did cartography in the 70s, all by hand. Sorry, I'm just this blasted.
That sounds like not a primary, if nothing else.
Yeah,
No,
it's
I
not,
don't
not a
think so.
primary.
Or
Sorry.
a secondary?
well, how does
Okay.
that relate to the parts that we're putting in here about connections for wildlife migration
Well,
and habitat?
we may have better sources of, or examples of that than that. The information, a lot of it has to do with land use and land cover, and this is more recent than that earlier map is.
Besides this, the science on some of this has increased, and the big issue for us is how does all this interrelate to everything else that's going on?
Yeah.
So,
And when it comes to the river corridors, that's something that is shown on the energy maps, and it's also shown in the maps having to do with flood resiliency. Okay, so I'm guessing though that land cover, land use is something that people think is relatively important.
Can you blow that up one more?
Sorry, go.
Can you zoom it in just a
Oh,
little
sorry.
bit more so
Yeah,
I can
yeah.
read the key?
Yeah, so this is showing, is it a commercial use? Roads are shown as transportation utilities.
Is that first brown one, does that say barren?
Brush.
It does say barren, and that's
Oh,
probably the
okay.
category given to the quarry. Rock
Oh.
is often shown as barren. It's, yeah. So it's showing different types of forest uses. There are more up-to-date versions of this that could be created. But the question is this something that people think is really important?
I think it's interesting, but
Not necessarily a front of the book thing.
yeah, I'm certainly open. It just seems really busy, and so the first time that I looked at the plan, and when we looked at the Essex plan and other ones, it is interesting to understand a little bit of history. Things like this that would give you an idea of the character of the town, the geology, like all of that stuff is really interesting. But if we're thinking of things that would be in there for actually being useful, then my perspective would be, no, it's not a primary, but once the plan is together, if we're looking for things to make it more colorful or more informative, then we could look at that list of secondary maps that we've just identified and maybe pull something in if it makes it more interesting.
Well, is this information, I think, is useful for somebody looking at the town and saying, okay, where is all the development? And, what's the use of all the lands? Where can things be filled in and where should things not be filled in? And if there's another one that's better than this, then yeah, but I think this information is important to have in the town plan.
Yeah.
We could certainly
I'd
get
call that a
a
maybe.
version of this. I guess the question would be, is this something that you'd see as being in the front, the designed version versus the non?
If it doesn't involve, it probably shouldn't be in there.
Well,
If it doesn't change as we change zoning, then it's,
well, it's showing, I mean, part of what it does is it helps you determine what your zoning should be. I mean, if we had no zoning and we were doing it for the first time, a map like this could be important as you were drawing lines. But when you have zoning, it's less important.
I don't see.
But it does change over time, seeing how areas are less open and a lot more, scrubby than wooded. That's a transformation that if we had enough of these maps, we would see that Shelburne has got more.
We are specifically talking about how we want to try and shape the future development so that it goes in, the right place. And we have a stronger idea about what we mean by that. And so I think this is, if there's a modern, more up-to-date version, this is a bit hard to read.
Maybe it works its way into the front.
I think so. I think this would be very interesting to look at next to, here's what the zoning is doing, right? That's kind of this Euclidean abstract thing, right, that we've slapped on the land, right? And then this is what that looks like. I think it would be very interesting to see them side by side. And so you could see, for example, where the conserved areas are. Why are they conserved? Well, that
Well, this is-
aligns with, it tells you in a second, it aligns with where water resources are, where scenic things are, et cetera.
The cover doesn't tell us where it's necessarily conserved, because there are a lot of areas, and we'll see this when we look at some other maps. Areas are wooded that aren't conserved,
I think
but
we
it
should
could
set
tell us.
this one aside as a strong maybe,
Yeah,
and then keep looking,
yeah.
and then we can come back to,
So, wildlife habitat, core habitat, deer wintering areas, wetland, trackers data, that hasn't been collected in some time, but that's information that I would imagine in some shape being in the front of the book. And like I was saying, the Natural Resources Committee and Sean have been working on a series of maps. So I'm gonna assume that something like this. Yeah,
with incorporated with other information.
Yeah, and I'd put that in the same, maybe just put that at the top of the list.
yeah, I think if we could get
And
an
this is
updated version of it.
somewhat related, a different type of natural resources information. I mentioned the rare, threatened, endangered, natural heritage, and things like that. These are kind of
This one's a little
of a
longer.
type that would be, could be massaged together.
And it is wonkier, I guess for me, it's what is the purpose of the town plan besides just being statute says certain things need to be in there? I mean, when we picked up the Essex plan, it wasn't just a policy document.
But
It
you're
was,
asking yourself the question, what's allowed? Where I live, or
Right.
where I'd like to live, or where I'd like to build a business, or where I'd like to,
and it's
grow a farm.
educational.
Right.
With some historical things and understanding, oh, they're like biological natural areas and these are what types of wildlife and where the habitats are, like that kind of stuff gets to that sense of place.
Sure.
I think.
And speaking of that, one of the maps that I think it does that also is where the lands that are conserved. And there's an updated version of this that I can show you, but this is where we get to this place where, thinking that there might be a budget for 3 or so natural resource maps in the front of the book, this maybe takes you to your limit. Or maybe not, but I'm thinking that people think this kind of map is important.
I feel like that first map about, I don't know, deer or something, there was a couple yeah, one, this one, like, I don't know if those could be integrated. They seem
The conserved land and the resource lands? I mean, this
conserved
one
land and the wildlife habitat.
and that one?
Um,
I mean,
I
This,
think
the
that was
series
what
of
we
maps
were just
that,
looking at.
yeah.
that Sean has prepared does something similar to that. It shows us where the resources are, it shows us where things are protected, and then the last one is gaps. Where is there a resource that isn't protected?
Right.
To me, this is really interesting and wonderful. I'm glad we're doing it. But this is too much information in there. It's too granular. I'd like to know, what's the snapshot and where are the gaps? And how do we, make sure that we don't like develop them for, at the very least, and, that we,
So you'd be thinking this could go in the back, but you'd rather see in the front the gaps.
yeah, this is kind of more like, okay, we've done all this great stuff and there's a lot of complexity to this. I think everybody gets that, but, you want to know where, this is about planning. Where are we going with this? What are our objectives? So, these are the places that we still, it's like on the transportation map, like it's great that we have a couple of, very nice trails and some sidewalks, but, we don't have an interconnected system. How do we get an interconnected system? It's kind of sort of thinking along those lines.
Well, again, I think what Sean's map, with the idea of showing us where the resources, what's protected and what's not,
Yeah.
the idea is to highlight those places that they would need to be a focus. But you don't always jump straight to that without understanding what's protected, but this map could be in the back.
I'm also thinking back to early on in these discussions, a very common question was, where are the town-owned lands? Is there
Yeah,
a
that's
map?
come up
What
a
is
lot.
that? And I think those types of things, this is very educational for people that don't look at these things on a regular basis. If this were to be done really explicitly, you would have an as-is, and then here's what we're gunning for. So this would be how it is today, but this sets the framework for any discussions about planning or around planning to ground people in what we have today.
Yeah. This kind of map is included in the open space plan. That's maybe part of the reason, that might be an argument that it wouldn't necessarily have to be featured in the printed town plan. On the other hand, it's, I think, generally considered a really important item. People do wonder where the conserved lands are.
Yeah, I think it's important.
Yeah.
Can I just say?
Put it on the front of the, on the
I
front of the
think-
document rather than at the end of the document.
I think this would be really interesting, calibrated with the transportation plan map. Because one of the things we want to do with the bike plan map is show, that these facilities are going to connect important public destinations and places of value in the community. And so to me, this looks like exactly what those are, right?
Well, there's another map that I can show you that's in the open space plan that does show the facilities, and it shows them relative to the places like the parks and the hiking areas and things like that people would want to bike or walk to. So, but they don't do it, it isn't on this map.
But unless this is going to be something that is the fold-out that can be a much bigger thing that can show that level of detail, you could put proposed path areas and stuff on here and you're not going to be able to see what's going on. I think this is a good broad view to understand this, but then to have something online that you can zoom in on and have that overlay.
Yeah, maybe we can talk more about paths when we get to the path-specific ones, or the transportation-specific ones. I was just interested in getting some, whoops, darn thing. Yeah, this one is really, in a sense, redundant with the other ones, but water courses, they are, right, they are what they are. I'm not sure if people just want to see a map of the rivers. We're not looking at the United States.
Could
so.
be a secondary.
Wetlands and hydric soils, like I said, there are a lot of different maps that have wetlands incorporated. Increasingly, hydric soils are shown along with wetlands because they're indicators. And then what was shown as regional study wetlands in the green, that's actually now a formal part of the state mapping system, although they're not class 2 wetlands. It's called the advisory wetlands. So wetlands, I would imagine, are something people want to see in some fashion, but they do show up a lot. There are wetlands shown in the energy series. There are wetlands that are included in the flood resiliency series, and it may not be that you want to have a wetlands map in the front of the book, but you would want one in there somewhere.
So to make this easier, are you really looking for what do we feel strongly about needs to be in the document and what needs to be in an appendix online,
So
that kind of
we
thing?
can give those documents and, we can say, okay, here are the ones, here's a working model for that map. And if people are somewhat okay with it, then we can give that to Maya and continue to work on the rest of them. So wetlands are important, but not necessarily front of the book, or yes, the front of the book.
I wouldn't say front of the book. Because everybody's going to be analyzing their own site in detail.
Yeah, they're
This
going to be an
doesn't show you enough
element.
detail to show I can't put a building right there.
Yeah, they're going to be an element of what are the important resource areas that are in the natural resources? What do we want to protect? What do we need to protect? What's protected? Where are the gaps? Wetlands are part of the what do we need to protect series. So probably the back of the book. Archaeologically sensitive areas. What do people think about that?
I think that's something you need to be looking in detail anyway. But, I mean, again, I think it's interesting. If it's,
But probably back of the book.
that would be my take.
Yeah. I mean, basically, they look like they follow water courses. Is that?
This is a really old map, but yeah, there's a lot of correlation in the state's model with water courses. Historic resources, this is just showing points, but yes, we can show the historic resources, or we could show a historic map, but historic resources,
I think same. It's a,
Unless you're describing each one, which this doesn't do.
Right.
It's not really, doesn't tell you much.
significant views.
I think that's really important.
Okay.
in what, like, to me, I'm just trying to distinguish between what is interesting to look at if I'm just curious about Shelburne and getting the whole sense of place, and a lot of those fit into that category, which if there's a separate appendix or link to be able to peruse those, that's great. The next level would be something that would be informative, that somebody who might be looking at the town plan deciding on whether or not to, like, how they're going to approach Shelburne, or where just generally they're looking for something. And again, all of these things could also be argued to be informative in that level. And then what absolutely needs to be in there to be complicit with statute and to have the document flow.
Significant views have been more important in Shelburne, and maybe because there was a map like this that existed, and so people could use it, but it's been more part of a lot of public discussions in the time I've been here, especially as it relates to things like Section 248 proposals. I mean, a lot of what the town was arguing with the Velco upgrade had to do with scenic impacts.
That's one of those broad-based informative from a Velco thing. If somebody's looking at putting any kind of utility or something that's going to run through Shelburne, you could look at that to get a general idea of where you're routing. Those people are also going to be getting into a lot more detail with different sources as well.
I mean,
I agree. This seems very vague and generally not as useful for the town plan. It's a detailed thing that somebody is going to be. I agree with you, Jason. on that
So,
one.
so sensing not a front of the book thing for sure.
I wouldn't say
It's-
front of the
it's-
book.
And I think all of these could be argued both ways.
It's really outdated. It's one of the big problems it has. Yeah.
And I'm also thinking of it from the standpoint of people being able to say, like, let's say we had this in the town plan, and somebody would come in and say, well, no, you can't do that because in the town plan there's this map that says this is a significant view. But the point of these things is to, I think we've used language to say, working reasonably with these things. It's not a black and white thing, and I think some people look at these as, well, if there's a significant view, then you absolutely cannot do any development. And I think that there's a pro to that for sure in terms of conservation and being able to maintain sense of place, but then it also becomes, does Shelburne become the town of NIMBY and that's it? And we're just not going to do anything in those areas that are yellow.
All right, if it's going to be useful, if we're trying to keep development from happening in the significant view area, I think I would use this thing and say, okay, I'm going to put my house in the yellow area because I want the view, and that would be, you'd want to develop those areas. And so it's not really working in the interest of, what we're trying to do to have this in the front of the book, I think. It's not a deterrent to development, it's an encouragement to develop those
Our
views.
language is, we clearly have stated in our language that we are to protect our views
So they can
Yeah.
reference the map.
as areas that are protected to some degree.
Or that we would
And you can stop somebody
Prioritize
from
production.
building a house here, but you can't stop them from putting in a row of pines, and eventually that view's gone. I've never seen anyone have to take trees down because they blocked a significant view.
Unless we're gonna put wording in the document to say, you can't develop in those significant view areas, which I don't think we are, that we shouldn't have this.
In the natural resources
We
section.
have language that says if it's a significant view area, there are sensitivities around it, and that needs to be taken into consideration.
We talk about
Like, it's all about
Scale of
balance.
building and-
Am I being too general?
I think what we need, I agree with a lot of what's been said, is I think the sensitive views map, we'd like it to be something that can inform, I don't know, maybe in the future we use this information with some other information to determine sort of like an overlay map that shows areas of concern, like where, if that really need to be developed very carefully for whatever reason. But we're not doing that right now. So I think just to have, show in a more consolidated version the zoning, which is, how we use land, right? That's what the zoning is. And then have a sort of a better version of that land use map, I think would probably be sufficient for the future land use section. And then these other things can go in the back. It's great that they exist, but they can go in the back. Because they're sort of tools that we don't really know how to use yet. And I think that's a really good point, that somebody could decide, well, that's exactly where I want my house to go. Thanks for pointing it out,
What part of this map you would see migrating to the future land use?
Well, I just maybe just have a reference to, there are all these additional, finer grained information, types of information that are available through an appendix. But, I think that the future land use language talks about updating this as soon as possible.
Yeah, it's been on the to-do list for a long time.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it needs to be updated, maybe showing the sort of kind of antiquated, older version of it is maybe not the best idea.
Okay. Flood hazard areas I mentioned are showing up in numerous different capacities. I don't think these do not need to be on their own map because they're going to be included in some other combination, unless someone disagrees. Slopes, this is where, there's no real reason for topography to be in here. But slopes were, you do have policy language, or you've used slopes in different ways in the past, so
It's in the zone bylaw too, right?
Yeah.
You do, but as long as these things are referenced to, and I think from a plan development perspective, the text is the biggest thing. That's what people are going to be reacting to. As far as adding in these maps, we can take some time while we're going through all the back and forth stuff and have discussions on the side around what are the maps that are going to be in the appendix and how are we linking to them within the text. Adding links shouldn't be a problem, or references.
Yeah. Okay, at this point, I think I'm just gonna look for any kind of reactions to, housing location, sewer surface area. Sewer surface area is related to the zoning district boundaries in large part. Housing location, people wanted at one point to know where things, how much of the housing is inside, outside.
Yeah, something like this combined with the one that the housing committee put together that showed by year. Like, if there needs to be a map for the housing section, that would be a good one.
Yeah, there doesn't have to be a map in the housing section per se.
Then make a reference to it and stick it in the back, or in the appendix.
So there are a few different maps that, kind of esoteric interest, what the traffic volumes are on town roads.
How old is this map?
That's probably 12 years old. I don't know, it's old.
So nobody updates these?
Well, the information's available, but it's not, I don't know that the effort would be made to,
I wouldn't even include it. It's 12 years old.
well, there could be a new version of this if people wanted it to, but it's kind of,
You mean we'd have to pay for it?
no, I'm just,
But not a primary.
Well, the ones like for Bay Road.
It's
Yeah.
Those are
12-year-old
There's more
information.
than
That's
3,000.
really,
I
What
think
would
he's
you
saying
use
he
it
can
for?
freshen it up.
Right.
If
yeah,
it
it
remain
could be
current.
freshened up, and it could also just be more about the relative volume
Right. I mean,
than the numbers.
Right.
it's important information if it's current, I think.
Yeah.
Even if it's not current, having something that somebody could point to say, well, the last time we had
Of how
it
that
was
could
this.
be
A color
useful.
scale would be interesting. If it was sort of a hot area versus not.
The Agency of Transportation updates those statistics every year.
They have a big database, you can just go and turn
We
things
could pull
on.
that map out of theirs.
Transit,
Take the data.
transit routes, which do change,
I mean,
I
so
think
it wouldn't be
this is-
good to have in the plan, but a reference to it.
I think this could be a part of another map, because we don't want the schedule, because that's outdated as soon as it's put in. But to show the bus line, I mean, there's only one bus line.
How about a picture of the bus or something like this? Why do we need to have? No one would ever look in the town plan to figure out when the bus was coming,
Well, not when, but where it comes. And this seems like that route, since it's so simple, it's basically one line. It could be put on another plan, maybe?
On a
just in the same
transportation.
way that you see the transit routes on whenever you open up your Google map, it's easily combined with others. I think it was
Yeah.
just because it was added at the last minute or something. Parking supply, parking in the village, wasn't it important enough in the time?
Are we calling it
It's-
appendix or
It would,
secondary?
well, if you feel it's important, it could go in the appendix. I'm not guessing that you are seeing it as the front.
No, it's outdated. And, thinking has evolved, best practices have evolved significantly since this era.
So
I
it
mean,
goes
we
in the
have-
archives.
Somehow, we need to, the parking is a big problem in the village, I think. And somehow, we need to address it. And if it's showing it on a plan, not one from like 20 years ago, of course, but is there a way to address it? To say that, I mean, do we have, is there any wording that we're putting in the plan right now to say that we look at?
Chapter. There are statements having to do with parking in the plan.
Well, the bigger story is how much our streets are under-leveraged as places for additional parking.
Sure, yeah.
So, this doesn't get to that at all. This suggests that we need to, we should be tearing down those historic buildings and putting in parking areas. You know, I mean, so I just don't know how helpful this is.
So it's an interesting reference, though, when parking topics come up to know, well, where are the parking spots? Oh, that map is 18 years old? All right, that needs to be a priority to update it. I think if we take it out, well, I'm good either way.
Can I just ask a
but-
clarifying question? When we talk about maps that would stay in or go out, are we talking about, we're talking all of them would be refreshed, or in the original form that you're showing us right now?
Well, there haven't been any or many that I've heard, totally jettisoned, but the things that I'm taking note of most are the ones that are the highest priority that we would be looking to have in a form that would go in the designed version, and the rest will go in.
But with 2018 information.
Is whatever best information that
Right.
we get, because we don't, we can't.
So we shouldn't be concerned that, oh, this is old, because if we were to use it, it would be refreshed.
Yes.
Okay.
So as this
A
new
parking
plan is going to be online, we can always integrate new maps in?
Well, you couldn't, if it's adopted, you can always have a map online, but you wouldn't call it a plan map unless it's been through the adoption process.
I think if we're trying to attract new business to Shelburne, a parking plan is important to show.
This is a plot, not necessarily a plan, but you're right.
Yeah.
Starting with this and then getting to a plan would
But,
be.
and we're not saying it's gone, it's just that it wouldn't be in the front of the book.
Right, right.
If it's not in the front of the book though, Dean, weren't you just saying it wouldn't be updated?
Well, no, it will update everything we possibly can. It's just not gonna be featured or as stylized or whatever as the front of the book. So we are 2 maps showing bike ped priorities. Maybe it's enough to say that the Paths Committee is gonna be working on a version, probably a single map that's integrating those. And that would be a front of the book item.
Could that be incorporated with public transportation?
Yeah.
the
It
bus
could
route?
potentially, yeah,
That would make sense.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, could you just do it?
Fire protection and water supply is something that has in the past been discussed. So where there are dry hydrants and other hydrants as part of fire protection, I'm not sure that that's a burning issue these days, no pun intended.
You're the only one that got it, Susie.
Water service area, again, pretty basic stuff. I don't think it's front of the book and could be combined with sewer. This is stormwater, outdated, could also be combined, perhaps. Electric and gas, those could be combined. Public facilities, those.
What is this showing?
Sorry? This is showing the location of the fire station, the library, the town facilities, many town facilities, with little points. Water tank, town hall, blah, blah, blah.
Could this maybe be incorporated into something like bike paths, transit,
Yeah.
like getting from one place to another that's meaningful?
The thing about the, I guess it's possible,
How you get to the sewage treatment plant.
yeah. The Paths Committee's, I think, gonna have an interest in a map that really, that expresses what they think are the most important facilities. They want to show what facilities we have now, and they want the map to show what are the ones that are most important to create in the future.
Seems like facilities and points of interest might be more interesting,
Right.
This seems strange not to have the beach, the farm, the museum,
Access area.
right, the parks.
So combine public facilities with other layers is what I'm hearing. Okay, and this is the last one, this is something that was added because of the bylaw requirement, not bylaw requirement, plan requirement, having to do with fluvial erosion hazards, which is now part of the flood resiliency. And so that'll be part of that flood series. Being mindful of the time, what I'm gonna do is write up a table or lists that show the combination of maps, or the maps that I see going, coming back to you for consideration for the front of the book, and those that would be in the back of the book, and start to give you mock-ups so that you can see how the combined versions would work together, so that you can hopefully come to some consensus.
Does that map drop down a little bit more?
Sorry?
Does that go down a little more?
Sorry. Whoops.
Okay.
Dick, do you want to see if your house is on a floodplain?
I'm definitely on the brightest orange, yellow line.
You have, according to this, the very high fluvial erosion hazard rating,
Yeah,
and maybe even extreme.
goes by my house.
That's what I thought.
I
Yeah.
lost 23 feet here.
Really?
Yeah.
So,
Town just reduced my taxes.
Did they really?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
in terms of the other plan topics, the thing that I wanted to review, and Jason can jump in here, having to do with public input sessions on the town plan, and basically boils down to trying to do meetings in conjunction with your August meetings.
So having, and I think you laid it out well. I've learned recently I'll miss the first meeting in August for what that's worth. But, so the 9th and the 23rd are our 2 meetings in August, and I like the idea that how you broke it out, where at the 9th there would be a chunk of time available during the commission meeting just for open discussion around those topics that you listed, the overall future vision, future land use, natural resources, and growth. And before that, just open drop-in sessions from 2 to 6. I was going to ask, is that something where it's like you'd be in the office if people had concerns or questions that they wanted to bring in, and then they could be raised during the commission meeting for discussion?
It could be. The idea is fundamentally about trying to accommodate people that have difficulty with something in the evening. And, my hope would be that there's enough traffic where we have a room like this set up, and there'll be people looking at things, people asking questions, but it's really difficult to predict. You might have stretches where there's nobody there, and then you might have 3 or 4 people, and that's maybe more challenging for one person to talk, to deal with, but we would make that attempt.
I'd say more just to have even if it's just something where there's notes where people could input their questions or concerns, and in
Yeah.
part of the advertisement, it's, hey, here's a link to the draft, review it. If you have questions about particular areas, bring those concerns to one of these sessions or submit them via email.
Yep.
And then during the commission meeting on those 2 dates, we'll discuss those topics.
And what I was trying to accomplish when I said with seed topics was to make some effort to not create a captive audience, but to maybe guarantee that there would be some people. So if the seed topics for the first night are going to be, or the first afternoon are going to be recreation and childcare, a specific effort is made to contact the childcare daycare operators or some people interested in recreation, and we say there's an afternoon session, anything could be on the table, but we really are going to be prepared to talk about childcare and recreation, and maybe those are the only people that we get, but if they're the only people we get, that's still good. And then the second session, it would be, the seed topic was listed as energy and telecom. So it's not, it's just an effort to try to juice the numbers a little bit and have people attend those afternoon sessions.
Historically, how much input has the community chosen to provide
Well,
at this stage of the
The
game?
last 2 plan updates had the benefit of major opinion surveys. And so there was a lot accomplished through that and through the publicity that followed the completion of the survey. So this time has been more limited. And there were, we had public meetings in association with those things, presentations. We haven't done this kind of process.
I feel like given the time of year,
It's gonna be tough.
wow.
Yeah.
It's basically like,
And I appreciate that, definitely. I just think that to go to the public hearing, unless,
right,
You know-
we're forced to do it in August. There's really no way around it.
I mean, yeah.
The public hearing is effectively the planning commission meetings. And I think it's great to have an informal drop-in session if it can be, I mean, I don't know. I don't know that we'll be able to get people from the commission for 4-hour blocks in the afternoon or anything. So
No,
I
the
assume
idea
this would
wouldn't be for to enlist your focus, the commission's focus would be on the evening sessions. The idea would be to try to get the community, and it would be a staff function, or unless someone really, talking about energy, if we heard that there was some group that wasn't plugged into the subcommittee somehow and they wanted to come, well, then maybe we would say, come. But it isn't intended to be a responsibility of commissioners to take part in those sessions. It may be a little bit different from the booth at Shelburne Day.
So it strikes me as that it's good to have the theme for the first half of August is these topics, for the second half is these topics, and for those drop-in sessions, if you want to come in and actually talk to somebody during the day, you could do that, or show up to the commission meeting if you wanted to say a few words to get it on the record.
Yeah.
But it's overall, it's encouraging people to provide feedback. So otherwise, if they want to submit via email or whatever their comments, it's mostly just to get feedback, right?
Yeah, right. We will have had the document out, and so people will be able to, if they've read it and they had some reaction to it, they'll be able to tell us. Not everyone will have gone through the document, and they'll maybe come to the meeting because we'll offer food and they'll want to talk about whatever their topic is. But that's still valuable, and it's still a way for all of us to hear from people in the community who are concerned about X, Y, and Z, and it may influence the thinking regarding the language in the plan. If you heard something from a lot of people that's directly contradicting the language in the plan, you might not want to go to the public hearing with the plan saying that thing, or you'll at least be prepared for it. But I think you'll want to be able to go to the public hearing having advertise these sessions, because you don't want to go to the public hearing and have people say, well, you're having this public hearing, and it's the first step in the adoption process. How much public involvement have you had? So it's really to try to bolster that.
Right.
So the basic idea is okay. The topic distribution is okay.
I'm curious what our attendance looks like for that time.
Just the meeting would be the PC meetings would be the ask. And then Shelburne
Better
Day,
luck if you went to the farmer's market.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing on the 18th.
Well, I mean, even if we had an hour or two at the farmer's market through August, you might
So
see.
do 4 sessions, you mean, or something like that?
Yeah, maybe an hour and a half or something for early birds or something. I think we would end up talking to more people than we will ever try in here.
But realistically, you want there have been announcements, there's been discussion that we're doing this plan. I think the people that are paying attention are paying attention. What we're really looking for, I think, is there anything that somebody is saying, absolutely not, I read what was in the plan, I don't like that at all, can you address this concern?
That's a really important type of comment.
Those are
We usually get those at the hearings.
Right. But what we're trying to do is to get some of these things out before it gets to the select board, and to give opportunities so that when we're at the last hearing and we think everything's all good and we don't have any wiggle room in the timeline and it's the end of the year and there might be quorum issues,
Yeah.
to be able to deal with changes. that you don't have people coming up last minute and saying, okay, now we have a problem. So that we've done our due diligence to say, hey, this has been advertised, we've talked about it, we've provided the opportunity, we think we've done a good job. So I think these need to happen. My only question would be around, and if you feel it works great, it works great, but the seed topics and that sort of thing, I would look at it as, like, for the 9th, just those seed topics would be included in the topics for the planning commission as well. Just, we're gonna be specifically focusing on these, but you could bring in any concerns that you have.
Yeah, I mean, people, I guess when I say seed topics, it's really not intended to affect the discussion as much as it is to try to
Draw a certain
focus
crowd.
who the advertising is going to. Because we're going to be, sending out notices and articles and, ramping that up, but it would be to personal contact in an effort to get those people to attend. But anything is up for grabs, yes.
Right.
And I think we also need to make sure we go back and remember, I really can only think of 2 examples from January of individuals who have already come in, had some concerns, and have we addressed those?
Right.
Because otherwise, they'll be back
Yeah.
with the same concerns, and
Yeah.
let's just save everybody some time.
Right.
Yep. I don't want to, Dick's idea is an interesting one. Do you want to start going to the farmer's market? Do you need a place to set up, or?
I know I'm out of town on the 11th and the 18th,
If you want to,
but I would do one.
if you want to make a presentation to Rotary or something like that, that's another way. I mentioned in the bottom part that could be spilling over into September.
I think probably we should be advertising as much as we can that the proposed plan is available online, and try to get somebody reading it, so maybe they will get excited enough to come in.
Yeah, you're right, and that's the reason to get the document in the shape that people will find appealing, which means not having, any more of these placeholder spaces for maps and things. That's why I was kind of on that harangue earlier. Then we absolutely have to, so that people will look at it. And I came this close when making the Front Porch Forum announcement for this meeting. I almost had a paragraph that was the preview, but I didn't want to say anything about these sessions until you had this discussion.
It's a good plan, and based on the feedback we get on the 9th, we could tailor and adjust.
Yep.
And then it would be good to schedule a processor on the 18th just to make sure that we've got some coverage. Based on times that we've done Shelburne Day in the past.
Yeah, it's visibility, I think, more than anything else.
Right.
And people will know that, oh yeah, they're talking about the plan. I will just take a second to explain an idea, or mention an idea that Ravi, the new planner, had mentioned. The city that he had worked in previously was doing a comprehensive plan update, and someone on staff had a puppy. And so all of their announcements made reference to the fact that the planning puppy was going to be here or there or whatever. So if people want to steal that idea, I think we could, but someone needs to volunteer their puppy. So maybe
I'll just say, unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to attend any of these except for the meeting on the 23rd, hopefully. So
Are you out the 9th?
I'm out the 9th.
Oh.
I'm gone all the weekends also.
Okay, and that leads me to ask, some people have updated the schedule, but I don't know that I
I need
noticed
to,
that.
I have not.
Okay.
I went out a couple months.
Okay. Well, we have to forge ahead, I think.
I could dial in. I don't know that would be particularly helpful, but from a quorum standpoint, I could
Yeah.
I could definitely dial in.
Okay.
All right.
Other plan sections that we need to talk about?
I think what you had included for future land use, natural resources, and telecom there were some highlighted comments.
Yeah, and I would like to go in the reverse order, actually.
Sure.
Telecom, because telecom was a section that I think we were just, essentially looking for some decision to okay the existing language and maybe restructure it and change objectives around. And I looked at doing that. I don't know if I did enough of it for people to be satisfied.
I actually was looking at it, and the only real change that I had was the word policies. If we change that to objectives, that's pretty much what they are, and then that fits goals, objectives, and
Okay,
recommended
that was
actions.
carried over from that weirdness. Okay.
Right. And then I think the third goal still referenced the Public Service Board. Oh, you changed it.
The third goal?
Yeah, you changed it.
Okay.
Just wasn't in the printout. Yeah, oh, right, that's the fourth one, the one above that goal. It just says Public Service Board.
Ah, yeah. So if there, it is an unusual structure with 3 goals and relatively small numbers of following policies, but I thought about trying to consolidate, and then I remembered how much legal involvement there was with all of it, and I said, no, I'm not gonna try that.
No, it's, yeah, I think for the sake of keeping things less complicated.
And this language, I will check against the corrections that we made in the other version, because this was stolen from the other. Okay,
Yep.
so then this will get cleaned up and shared with Andrew and Maya, so that they can get it in the format. Natural resources, there was a page that had the one outstanding issue that I understood needed to get resolved, and that was rewriting a particular paragraph that was kind of cumbersome. And the Natural Resources Committee met last night, and they are okay with the rewrite. So if the group is okay with the rewrite, then the full Natural Resources section could move on as well.
Mhm. Were there any other
I have nothing on
1.3?
Okay. There were a few more loose ends with future land use. And I'm hoping people had a chance to. So there were some comments that I wanted to just get clear on. And this number 9, is there a need to reconcile this with other versions of the transportation section? Is it just to make sure that the same language is parroted in both?
Yeah, I think that was my comment. It was just more to make sure whatever we had was consistent. I mean, that concept, though, it's just saying, yeah,
And it really ended up being reduced. So I guess it's not clear from this comment. The language that was retained in the other section ended up being ended up being what was in the yellow. So are people happy if it goes down to the yellow? So this was more ambitious than what ended up being retained in the transportation section.
So are you saying,
So if you want it to be, right, if it was reconciled with the transportation section, this is going to be reduced significantly in size, and I just wanted to make sure before I did that, that is what people want, that it would be, and I think it's fine to say, initiate community discussions regarding.
I'm much happier with that than I
But the whole paragraph exists in the transportation section.
The whole paragraph is in this section, but not in transportation. Yeah. Only the yellows in transportation.
So you're saying put the whole paragraph in transportation, but only
Well,
the yellow
I'm
in
not,
this section?
I'm not saying that. I
Right.
just wanted to make sure. It was kind of a major difference, and I just wanted to be sure that you really mean it.
I want to throw some more ammo at it.
You throw some more what at it?
More ammunition. I think that I think it needs to say that it's going to be evaluated so that it does not reduce the amount of traffic that can get through the village. If it does that, then it's going to impact Falls Road, Mount Philo, Spear Street, more than it's already impacted. So I would hope that the discussion will have those concerns.
Well, I mean, I think, isn't the basic idea, though, to keep exploring this idea of Class 1 designation?
That's why I say I don't have a problem with the top line as saying exploring it. It makes sense to do that. But the rest of it is saying that this is going to be good for the town.
Yeah, but that's going to
And
go.
it's not necessary.
If
It's saying
people,
consider it if it's economically sustainable. That, to me, means that there would be study, discussion. It's not saying just.
What this
do it.
line, what that line does is exactly what you're saying, but the rest of this does not say that.
I mean,
It's
it can
saying-
blatantly say advantages and disadvantages.
Municipal ownership of Shelburne Road would enable the community's vision to take, maybe it will, maybe it won't. So the rest of it is kind of making it more decisive. I think studying it is fine. I have no issues at all with that.
Right.
But to make the statements that it's all going to be
Right.
beautiful, it may not be at all. It may not be functional
So would it
to
be-
do that.
Is there a way to manipulate the word would?
Why
Sounds
can't
like a
we
problem
just,
word, yeah.
well, may, yeah,
May
sure, but
enable
I still think the paragraph says way too much. It's
It's leading.
very leading.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
But the first sentence says kind of what we want to do.
The what?
Bad to have it leading?
I don't
Yeah, I
know
think so.
enough about this issue
There's,
to know.
I
Well,
know
think
when,
by having that in, it's saying there's a reason for everybody to initiate community discussion, because there may be benefits.
it's not the first time we've had this discussion, though. It won't be. This is probably the third time.
How about this? How about we take out sentence 2 and 3, and we just move the municipal ownership could enable the community's vision, and then we're done.
Yeah, I can live with that.
And that's
Okay.
pithier and I think, not quite as leading.
Yeah, sure.
Great.
That would be good.
Sounds great.
okay, I got that. All right, good.
And so that full paragraph will exist in both sections?
Yes.
Great.
So the,
Thing on, while we're on that.
nope, can't do it. It's too late.
Item 12, I think it's item 12. It says recognize a village situated within a threat McCabe's Brook watershed and all that. And I wondered if we couldn't say something about when permits are applied to be changed by the DRB, that they should seek to fulfill the goals in item 12, which is changing over to swales, maybe from drainage, or those solutions, if we could somehow incorporate that too.
I think there's way too much in there.
It is really
Probably is busy,
cumbersome.
but the idea is to reduce,
I would
somehow to
say,
involve the
I think
DRB.
this
I would say end at watershed and then just do ensure that environmental efficiencies, blah, blah, blah.
Or, yeah,
And that would be pithier, and I think it, we're not getting into micromanaging how this
And
happens.
pedestrian is a little limiting.
Well, but that's the primary focus in the village is a high-quality pedestrian experience. So, and the reason for the pedestrian experience is there's a real-life conflict with this, which is the site plan for the new library has prioritized stormwater management over, what is possibly like, ground zero for pedestrian experiences in the village. So I think that this is an attempt to try and get some balance in there, recognize that, what might work out on, but the Kinney Drug on Route 7 is not appropriate in the village. So there needs to be some calibration of the right facility and for the right context.
So there's consensus to remove the second and third sentence. Is there a problem with pedestrian, or that's okay? And then
Are you
also
okay with that?
Well, I
now,
just thought
Susanna?
that there might be, even beyond the pedestrian experience, also the
human experience?
bicycling
Well-
and going to a baseball game and all of those experiences.
The whole social gathering experience, maybe that would be social engagement, social gathering would be something to put in there.
Human experience?
I would
That is, in a manner that is human scale, maybe? Sorry,
Human
Jason, I interrupted you.
No,
Go ahead.
no, you're good. Like all these suggestions, I feel like I know what you mean.
I think if we limit this to the village, I can live with it, but I don't like to put stormwater, to put too many things that affect stormwater.
Well, but.
Throughout the community, I think
Right.
stormwater has to have a priority.
Right, but this has been, this was a big problem, and it's gonna be, when it's built, it's gonna be a big problem, because they're creating a site design that prioritizes stormwater management over the pedestrian experience in the town center.
So.
So this was an attempt to try and not have that happen again.
But we're talking about the village,
Right.
so that's fine as
I
long
guess
as it
pedestrian
doesn't
is fine.
migrate to
I'm
the
just
rest of the.
splitting hairs, it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I don't think it's going to be.
And it does include the last sentence. I just want to make sure that, as well as the next to last. Because I know where it's.
Yeah, I think it should just be, you
Yeah.
have the first sentence and the last sentence, and
Yeah.
then you're done.
Agreed.
Well, last
Yeah.
two sentences is what you'd
Yeah, I
said.
think, just the last sentence, I think is fine.
Yeah.
So the one that starts stormwater or the one that starts ensure that?
Yeah.
It's stormwater is the last
So
sentence.
Oh, you don't-
don't have ensure that environment?
No,
Right.
so you just have recognize that the village is situated within the threatened watershed, and then just the last sentence.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
All right. So, so the Shelburne Road design, ensure consistency is the same. Okay, so what I was doing with this. Boy, sorry, brain cramp here. So, ensure consistently, maybe drop the 2006 reference. Yes, there are more recent Route 7 studies. Sorry, I'm just kind of fading here.
How about just develop a design for Shelburne Road as it passes through the village that is limited to 2 lanes, incorporates pedestrian amenities, and is sensitive to the visual qualities of Shelburne Village?
That can work for me.
Does that work? And then we get out
Sounds good.
references to outdated
Yeah.
plans and stuff.
So say that again, I didn't get that.
Develop a design for Shelburne Road as it passes through the village that is limited to 2 lanes, incorporates pedestrian amenities, and is sensitive to visual qualities of Shelburne Village. And I guess, and undergrounds, or whatever, I don't know that,
If we do the
guess-
underground, it should be on us.
yeah.
And not start with work with the Vermont Agency of Transportation, so you start it right with.
Um,
design.
sentence will be develop a design for Shelburne Road as it passes through the village that is limited to 2 lanes, incorporates pedestrian amenities, and is sensitive to the visual qualities of Shelburne Village. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So there was a comment about revisiting housing affordability objectives, and I just didn't know where that needed to go. Everywhere in growth area 2, protect natural resources by pursuing smart and compact development that reduce auto dependency. Was there some concern about the need to also incorporate housing affordability as part of this? Does anybody register with?
Well, in theory, you often get more of a range of housing types if with compact neighborhood design, but
I feel like we talked about that in another section.
Yeah, given the affordable housing references elsewhere, I think that
Right.
would cover
Right.
that specifically.
So
Sounds
nothing,
like
nothing to
we're
worry
okay,
about
yeah,
then.
I think
Okay.
nothing to worry about.
So these will have to be filled in when we have the maps. Strongly encourage land uses that are comprised of small scale economic.
I think that was my comment. It was just more, it kind of struck me that all of the discussion we had around those things, we're talking about the rural area and that's where those applied. I don't know that there needs to be one specifically, but that's what that relates to some degree.
Okay, so,
I'm not
okay,
pushing anything. It was an observation.
then I think the last one.
how about strongly encourage land uses in the rural area that are resource-based, blah, 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 and that are compatible with the scale and nature of the rural area.
And what does that mean small? Does that mean big? I mean, I could see it being argued both ways. At least with small scale, that's choosing a direction. I'm just not.
But is that, this is an objective, right?
Recommended action.
Those are next. We're on point 6.
Oh, all right, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, this is pro small scale rather than any scale. Even though in a rural setting, it may be, there may be certain things that they'll work at a large scale because it's rural.
Well,
Why don't we just call them strongly encourage small-scale land uses in the rural areas that are resource-based, such as, does that work?
scale.
Are we talking about agriculture uses or just?
It's forestry, agriculture, and horticulture.
I mean,
Yeah, sure.
I think any word that you use there could be, like, what does small scale mean?
Right.
Because
I appreciate the point.
Not
but,
a
I mean,
challenge, it's just
it'll stay small scale. I thought that's how we were leaving it, but then we were Kate was coming back to with something compatible with the rural landscape, and then that meant we were no longer necessarily encouraging the small scale. It was de-emphasizing the scale. So
Okay, well,
is that what?
small-scale land uses that are resource-based, such as blah, 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 and then just take the rest of it out. And that's less stuff.
So strongly encourage small scale land uses?
Yeah. I don't know, does that work?
I mean, if we need to have small in there.
Okay, maybe not even that.
Well,
Was there an issue with how it's worded now in general, or are we just trying to make it pithier at this point?
Small-scale economic units that conserve the rural landscape, I don't, doesn't seem kind of, it's hard to understand what that means.
I mean,
Yeah, would a large farm be prohibited in
Right.
the rural landscape?
right, and then what does large mean?
Yeah.
I think compatible is the strong word.
That
I
that
like
is that. Yeah, compatible is big.
Compatible
yeah.
is good.
Okay.
Well, not big. Important.
it does say shall. That's,
It does. Sh- yeah, I mean, if you say strongly encourage small scale land uses, there's going to be a debate
How about
around what small
efficient?
means.
I don't have a problem with that last line. I don't know
Well,
why.
can we just say forestry, agriculture, or horticulture, and that are comprised of,
Compact economic units.
and that are compatible with the scale and nature of the rural area? Just take out
Yeah.
Ah, right, yeah.
that middle area.
That are, yeah.
So from comprised to shall be, take that
Get
out.
out that, yeah.
unfortunately, I don't have the editable version of this
So are
one.
you doing, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to butt in. Are you inserting small scale in the first, strongly encourage small scale land uses and then?
No.
No,
No,
I think it
okay.
sounded like just get rid of comprised of small scale economic units that conserve the rural landscape uses shall be,
Okay,
and then
got it.
the rest of it is good. Does that
Mm-hmm.
work?
Okay.
So then the, point one.
I just wasn't sure what was really going on there. Expand it to include broader what and why community discussions that focus on.
I wrote that, I have no idea what that's.
I like it.
I think I was just trying to, be more
Thoughtful.
thoughtful and prescriptive about how we do things.
That's
Um,
great.
So, you think it makes sense to you? Yeah?
Okay.
If it does, great.
Okay, great, good. Maybe it'll make sense to me too, again.
So you're leaving it, and then second goal is you're leaving it.
Yeah.
Okay, that finishes that section.
All right. So we're good to move on to updates?
You are.
All right. I know there was at least one, I think you had to mention. I don't know if that was going to be under updates or commission.
Oh, yeah. I was wondering if I can do it under either one. Okay, so on the VPA listserv, there was this notice the other day about White and Burke, the development company, were, they host something called the Annual Vermont Development Conference every November. And they say they're in the midst of planning their programming for next year's event. They hosted a special session for the town of Jericho to help the municipality and landowners brainstorm planning and implementation concepts for the Jericho sawmill redevelopment project. The attendees found it to be engaging and enjoyable to look at a real problem, hear others' perspectives, and feel like they were contributing to something. So they are looking to do something similar this year, and their planning committee has asked to see if any communities might be interested. So the question was posed, do you have a problem or issue with which you could use help from a captive audience of 40 to 75 development and land use professionals? And I was thinking some fresh eyes on the form-based code Route 7 situation might be very helpful. We as part of the planning with Brandy, we did solicit some feedback on the zoning, and we had a really poor turnout. And so I was thinking, if we made it the feature of this, we could get a lot of different opinions. So the captive audience that they're referencing includes a mix of attorneys, architects, brokers, builders, developers, engineers, entrepreneurs, environmental scientists, landscape architects, lenders, planners, and more. So it would really have the whole, community that might be involved in renewing those
Great
properties.
exposure to get people aware of what's going on in Shelburne.
Yeah,
and
we
what
could
the
do like a little
possibilities are.
press release, we could sort of, anyway, it's just an idea. If we're interested, it would be a 75-minute session. Could be set up in any number of ways. They're very flexible about it, but they would like to hear from us by Monday, the 23rd. So I just saw it and thought, hey, some free
When you mentioned
feedback.
it to me, Kate, I think, didn't you say, I knew you were interested in the Route 7 corridor and the form-based zoning, but you had a particular angle on it, I thought, that was involved. What would we need to do to get, basically, short of making it mandatory, get people to actually use form-based zoning as compared to the conventional?
What do they see as disincentives, or obstacles, shortcomings, things like that? I think it would just be really helpful to know, do they think this is plausible here? That's like probably maybe the first question.
When you say this is plausible, meaning making the
The
form-based,
degree of development that we are, is this realistic? Do they think that these regulations are realistic here? I just would like to know.
Like, what would I know in just chatting with developers randomly, there's an impression where some would say, oh, I really like doing business in this town because it's just easy. There are times where I've heard Shelburne being discussed and they say, oh yeah, no, wouldn't really think of that because it's just confusing.
Right.
So being able to have that kind of an audience, it might be interesting just to A, get that feedback, but B, get them thinking about, oh, Shelburne has this thing, they are looking at doing stuff and
Yeah. I just don't see any downside personally to it. So, anyway, just wanted to bring it up.
what would that look like though? Would that be like staff putting together some kind of a proposal from more of a formal town perspective and then having support like to review kind of thing, or?
Stephanie's put this out there, I think there'll probably be multiple communities responding. My take on it is that people are going to be getting together to do this session, and they opt to go to these sessions because they want to be part of problem solving. So I think we need to be describing clearly what the problem is, and a way that we think that all this brain power can be harnessed to come up with some solutions for it. I think it needs to be focused like that rather than just too much, what do you think about the development opportunities in Shelburne?
Well, but I mean, the problem is that we adopted form-based zoning as an option and we've had one.
We've had one project through the process and another one started and pulled back, although I've had contacts with them and they may be coming back. And a fair amount of interest, but not with people pulling the trigger.
So I wonder if this thing for the 23rd, and I don't know if I'm confusing this, was this the one where they said it doesn't have to be something formal and polished? Was that it?
Yeah.
It's just more
Yeah.
give us an idea that we can think about? Because if that's the case, it could be, hey, we have this problem where we adopted it, it's there, it's not really being used to this community. What would you say we could do to make this better and more enticing?
Yeah,
And just see what they come back with.
Yeah.
We need to simplify,
It-
to help them, have them help us simplify the plan that we have in place. We still have the same goal, but to make it a little easier process to digest.
It's a big document, though.
Yeah.
And if unless they're familiar with it, 75 minutes? Is that how much the time?
Yeah, it's not much time.
But it could be more around what their interactions have been in other communities where they either do or don't have form-based zoning, or what are the things that, from their perspective, help with a town being attractive to developers really wanting to do stuff or to work with the community to enhance it in the way the community wants.
Right, so the whole point of the form-based code, well, there are a number of points, but one of the main points was to try and kind of revitalize that commercial corridor,
Yeah.
right? And improve the sort of arrival experience of coming to Shelburne and all those kinds of things. And also to incentivize redevelopment of those very small, outmoded properties. Instead of what had been the trend, which was, greenfield development happening south of Bay Road primarily. So, so we adopted after, 6 years of hand-wringing, we adopted, finally, on an optional basis, the form-based code. And, it's not really, hasn't been really working. So, what are some of the reasons for that? What is the fact that it's not mandatory, is that a disincentive? I would assume that it probably is one, because you have no confidence if you're going to make an investment that, something that you do is necessarily, who knows what the guy next to you is going to do, So we look wishy-washy, among other things. So I just would like to get some feedback. I mean, if we're going to, I think it would help us make some better decisions about next steps, but it would also help the select board to understand, we're sort of doing some due diligence,
And we wouldn't need to hammer it out now, but would there be any harm in putting together a few bullets and responding to that request, just to see what they're, because they could say, oh, well, we've got a handful of very targeted projects, so this probably wouldn't make it, and then, okay, we know.
Yeah.
But it could be, hey, this is an interesting thing, yeah,
Well,
let's
I'm looking
work
at
it
an
out.
entire, they were looking at a specific project before, but looking at an entire, corridor might be like, whoa, that's just well beyond what we're interested in doing. Or they might say, this is really cool. We'd
Right.
love to.
So I'm just asking if there's any harm in seeing what they say
Yeah,
and throw some bullets together.
that's what I would think.
And are we under the impression that some of the folks in the room would be local developers that
I don't know.
would know us, or
Yeah, I
would
don't
be
know. I mean,
interested in
there wouldn't
working
be
with-
any reason to exclude them, but it's just that we tried to get a bunch of them to come the last time, and
Right, no, I'm wondering
if.
is this the captive audience that we're going for, and is it a great opportunity? Are these people from southern Vermont that we're not going to be working
Oh,
with?
I have no idea who. Yeah.
I think it's statewide, but I think if you're looking at that group of targeted 40 to 75 land use professionals, that
We can get an
the
idea
feedback could
of
be
what
good.
types of businesses would find it appealing to be on
Right.
Shelburne
I mean,
Road.
there's a lot of information that we don't have. One of the other things that's happened since we approved the optional code was that, the bottom has fallen out of the retail market. So a lot of our assumptions were made on, we're going to have all this retail here. It was going to be like local retail and some regional retail kind of transitioning as you got to South Burlington, where they would have more of the regional retail. Well, retail is not doing so well, I think, as everybody knows, right? So do we need to kind of rethink some of the regulations around that,
So we
I don't
could
know.
put together some bullets and see what
Yeah.
they say.
Yeah.
Would there be any
I mean, I think we could
objections?
ask like some really broad brush questions, not like, are we on the right track kinds of questions, not like, what do you think of like how we're talking about windows here and this, nothing like that, like
Right.
I mean, we
building
will be
types or
in an
anything.
intense period with the select board at that point, right, in November. That'll be like final draft time. I don't know if that affects anything, but,
We're gonna be almost done now,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Our end, we're just gonna be trying
okay.
to.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, I think this could
That's a good
happen as, like, separately from
Right.
the town plan
Feedback,
update.
then
It's
we'll
just
go back
to,
work.
we sort of, the form-based code project that we had been working on kind of fizzled out, and this would just be a way of maybe starting to,
See if we can breathe some
Reinvigorate
life into it.
yeah, kind of resuscitate it a little bit, but
think it's
a bit
great.
more purposefully, you know?
I like it. All right.
Can I, are we
Yeah.
through that one? Can I jump us back to the town plan again? Or are we done with that item? Just to, like a couple of meetings back, I was gonna come up with some wording for,
Thank you for remembering.
for the transportation section, for a quiet zone for the train crossing at Harbor Road. And so I've got something.
Oh, great.
Just scribbled out. Can I throw that out? I'm not sure exactly where it fits in it, but I guess this would be an action item or something like that. Yeah, okay. All right, something like the state and federal government allow individual towns to petition to designate railroad quiet zones where trains are not required to sound their horns or may be prohibited from sounding their horns. Given the density of residential population near the Harbor Road Railroad crossing, consider applying for quiet zone status for that crossing.
Great.
Does that
I wonder
sound-
if we should adopt that as a project as opposed to planning, maybe use this now as something to put it right together and hand it to the select board separately as opposed to putting it in a town plan.
Well, isn't the process that goes in the town plan that we're recommending a consideration of something?
Depends
and
how
then-
quickly we want to act upon it.
Well, we could have the recommended action in the town plan and then proactively just make the suggestion to the select board. And then if they decide not to bite on it now, at least we have the recommended action in the plan.
Sure, yeah.
And if they do, then, well, we're ahead of the curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the sooner the better. We can try to get that to happen, that'd be great. But I agree.
Is that something that you could write up and then get?
I have
What?
it written up.
Yeah,
Whether you
so
can read
that's-
this or
I meant
not,
digitally.
I can-
You email it after you've typed it, and I can read it. Is
Okay.
that what you were?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're an architect. Your handwriting is going to be like pristine.
Yeah, that sounds great. I
Okay.
think that, and I like your idea too of just submit it.
It wouldn't take very long.
Right. Okay.
I mean, just for context, Shelburne has a history of dealing with quiet zone issues back when the commuter rail was being planned, so there's a history here of that.
No other updates? Any commissioner questions or comments? All right. Any other business? Correspondence? Motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Moved by Kate, seconded by Stephen. We're adjourned. Aye.
And if
All
you
in
haven't
favor?
filled out the schedule, please do so if you have a chance. I do know that some people have put their availability.
If